The market square lay under a washed-out sky, pale as old cotton. Dust drifted through motionless air, undisturbed by breeze or morality. A lone church bell tolled across the way, but heads remained lowered. Every gaze was locked on the rickety stage where women stood in lines like weathered posts, struggling to stay upright. Bo Thatcher arrived just as the midday sun grew fierce, his jacket heavy for the season, boots thick with crimson dirt from his property. He hadn't planned to stop. Here, Whitfield held nothing for him anymore. Too many ghosts clinging to shop windows and delicate curtains. But his plow needed repair and his horse required medicine. He'd promised himself to stop living off his land without fixing what sustained it. He was securing his mount near the supply store when the sound reached him. The strike, sharp and wet, like a blade meeting flesh. The noise twisted through the stillness, splitting the quiet like thunder without its storm. Nobody stirred for a heartbeat. Not the minister's spouse, frozen with her gloved fingers near her lips. Not the banker's son, caught mid-motion. Not Bo, who slowly turned toward the trading post with something dark forming in his expression. Upon the platform, a young woman barely past 20 swayed from the blow, her face twisted sideways, her mouth pale where she bit back her cry. The man who hit her, Ezekiel Moore, broad and red-faced, surveyed the crowd as if challenging anyone to interfere. "She refuses to stand properly," he announced, wiping his palm on his waistcoat. "Unfit to bear a decent name, much less run a home. Wild as an untamed creature." The lawman stood nearby with crossed arms, offering no words. "She goes to whoever pays $5 and takes her quickly," Ezekiel continued. "Or I'll drag her back and train her correctly." The girl shed no tears. She remained there with one plait coming undone, her bodice ripped at the shoulder, carrying something deeper than rebellion in her stance. Something like ancient humiliation worn too long. Bo blinked once, then stepped from the wooden walkway, moved slowly past the crowd's edge, and entered the clearing with footsteps that neither rushed nor paused. He remained silent. Ezekiel sneered. "You fancy her too? Don't imagine a morning man like you can handle fire a second time." Bo avoided his stare. His words came quiet and even. "I'll offer 5. The gathering tensed. Someone cleared their throat. The caller hesitated, then stammered. "Are you certain? That's a legitimate offer. She belongs to you." Ezekiel muttered dismissively, brushing away dust. "Fine by me." Bo didn't extend his hand to her. He shifted slightly toward the yard's border. "Come along." The girl wavered. Her fingers twitched, then clenched into fists. She stepped down unassisted, gripping a small bundle against her chest. The crowd separated silently as they walked together. None dared speak, though many whispered. Letty Granger, the widow with thorny eyes, rocked on her front seat and murmured to her neighbor, "He'll rue this by nightfall." By the time they reached the town's edge, the girl hadn't uttered a sound. Bo helped her mount the horse without lifting her. She rode behind him, maintaining distance, not touching. The path from Whitfield curved like an unresolved question. It wasn't until the second mile that she broke silence. "You have no idea what you're undertaking." Bo kept his eyes on the trail forward. "Perhaps not." "I'm not gentle," she said. "Not compliant, not pristine. I'm not built for that." He gave no response. The path narrowed beyond the riverside trees where water murmured over stones. The horse slowed naturally, soothed by the sound. She shifted in the saddle and winced. He noticed but said nothing. "What do they call you?" he asked softly. "Dora May. Is it acceptable if I use that name?" She nodded once. A hawk soared overhead, circling. The heavens stretched wider as they traveled north where trees thinned and land opened into wind-carved plains. His ranch sat at civilization's edge, bordered by fence posts leaning like weary men, and a barn that tilted even more. When they arrived, Bo dismounted and offered his hand, not to touch, just to steady. She ignored it and got down alone, grimacing as her boots met earth. He didn't direct her movements. He opened the door and entered first, not as a master, but as someone who also owned anguish. She followed. The dwelling was modest, simple, with walls that creaked like they remembered better times. Dust sparkled in light streaming through the shuttered window. He gestured toward the back room. "That one's prepared." She surveyed the space. "Your wife, has she been gone long?" 3 years. She said no more. She didn't set down her bundle. Instead, she took a seat near the cold hearth and wrapped her arms around her knees like someone bracing for thunder. Bo went outside. He split wood in silence, not for warmth, but for purpose. Each swing drove the axe deep into the stump, but peace didn't come. The image of the strike haunted him. The sound, how she didn't flinch afterward, how nobody prevented it, how he nearly didn't. Inside, Dora stared at the lifeless fireplace. She touched her cheek where the mark was fading, but she knew how long it would echo. Years, perhaps, like all the others. She slept on the floor even after he mentioned again that the bed was vacant. She didn't trust rooms with entrances. She didn't trust kindness, not after being purchased, traded, and struck like livestock. That night, thunder rolled across distant hills. Rain tapped the windows. Bo sat at the table with a tin cup, candlelight flickering against his hollow jaw. He didn't watch her or even pray. He simply sat with the kind of silence that couldn't be learned. In the night's depth, she rose to use the wash basin. He glimpsed her then, her back marked with whip scars, fresh and old. She moved like someone accustomed to pain, careful with every step, never seeking pity. The following morning, he left coffee on the table. She didn't drink it, but she remained. 2 days passed, then 3. He never questioned what brought her to the auction. She never explained. But on the 4th day, she found herself sweeping the porch, not to please him, just to make something cleaner than she felt. When she overheard him in the barn talking to a horse named Dora, something inside her tightened. That night she asked, "Was that her name?" He nodded. "My wife. And you still call the horse that?" He shrugged. She favored the name. The horse doesn't mind. She smirked for the first time. It wasn't warm, but it was alive. In town, they were already gossiping. That the widowed man had taken in a wild girl, that she shared his bed, that he fed her meat while good churchwomen went without. None of it true. He fed her beans. She slept near the fireplace. He spoke little. She spoke less. But something was shifting. On the 7th day, she stepped onto the porch while he sat whittling a fence post. The sky was deep purple, sunset's final edge pressing against the hills. "Do you have faith in God?" she asked. Bo wiped the blade. "I believe some folks need him." "And you don't?" "I did once, when I thought suffering made sense." She nodded slowly, wind brushing her hair across her eyes. She didn't tuck it back. She turned to go inside, but stopped. "I believe I was already shattered before he struck me." Bo didn't move. "I believe the strike just reminded me I'm not permitted to forget it." He looked up and their eyes met fully for the first time, not as man and woman, not as buyer and bought, but as two people who'd both heard something break inside them once, and never quite found all the pieces. "I won't strike you," he said. "I know." They went inside. Later that night, he built a fire without asking. She sat beside it, and for the first time in ages, she removed her boots. In the darkness, just beyond, the ranch fence, someone stood watching, a shadow on horseback. Moonlight caught the metal at their hip, and though the fire crackled warm inside the cabin, the cold had not entirely left the land. The door closed with a wooden thud that echoed through Dora's ribs. She didn't flinch, just stood there, bundle still pressed to her chest, her eyes fixed on nothing and everything simultaneously. The fire whispered softly behind her, but she didn't turn to it. Heat meant comfort, and she wasn't ready to accept that yet. Bo didn't bid good night. He never did. He nodded quiet and plain and disappeared into the dark hallway where his boots left a slow rhythm against the floorboards. There was no lock on her side of the house, but she still sat with her back to the door, a habit. She'd learned early that sleep was only safe with a wall at your spine and steel near your fingers. Outside, rain began again, Thin as thread, soft as old regrets. It whispered against the window panes, tapping the glass like someone too polite to demand entry. She stayed awake until it turned to silence. The next morning, sun blinked through the east window with colorless light, washing the walls in pale blue. She didn't move at first. Her body ached in places she'd forgotten were hers. But the quiet was different here. Less cruel, still full. Of tension, yes, but not the kind meant to break her. When she opened the front door, the prairie yawned wide before her. No fences, no gallows, no men with money in their palms and fire in their teeth, just wind raw and cold, pressing through the grass like a forgotten hymn. She went out and gathered wood without being asked, not from gratitude, but defiance. She could pull her own weight, had done so long before her hands were big enough to hold anything heavier than a bucket. The logs scratched her arms, but she held on. Bo didn't comment when he saw the pile by the hearth, just grunted softly, nodded once, and returned to mending the broken gate. She didn't ask what broke it. She assumed something big and stubborn, like most things worth keeping. Later that afternoon, she found herself sweeping the porch again, the same long boards she'd swept 2 days before. There was little dust, but she swept anyway, carving clean, lines through the silence. She caught Bo watching her through the barn slats. He didn't look away. She didn't either. That night, she finally drank the coffee. It was bitter and too strong, but warm. She cradled the tin cup between her hands like a stolen luxury, letting it heat her palms and memory. She remembered a fare once, years ago, a small cup of sweet tea given by a traveling merchant. The kindness had been accidental, but she remembered the taste. Bo spoke that evening. Not much, just enough. "You ever ride a horse?" he asked, not looking up from the tin lamp he was fixing. She shrugged. "Once. Didn't go well." "Horse or rider?" "Both." A flicker of a smile, not full, not even half, but the corners of his mouth curled for a heartbeat. And that was something. She stood. "You want me to ride?" He shook his head. "No, just wondered if I needed to patch another saddle." She looked at him hard, then said, "Most men ask with an edge." "I don't have edges left," he said, "just places that healed crooked." She didn't answer, just went back to her spot near the fire. That night she dreamed of a time before bruises, before slaps and sales, a kitchen with yellow light, a woman singing while peeling apples, the scent of cinnamon. She woke with her fingers curled into the hearthrug, her cheeks damp. She didn't cry, not while waking, not ever. But the dampness didn't lie. The next morning brought frost that crusted over the fence rails and cracked under her boots. She found Bo already outside, splitting wood, steam rising from his breath like smoke from a quiet engine. His sleeves were rolled, revealing arms marked with calluses and silence. He didn't greet her, just passed her the axe handle. She took it. Her swing was awkward but firm. He corrected her once with gesture, not words. The blade bit the stump better the third time. Her shoulders burned by noon, but she kept going. Pain was easier than passivity. After, they sat on overturned crates drinking water from the same tin dipper. She watched a hawk circle overhead, and for the first time in years, her shoulders didn't tense at the sound of wings. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. He wiped his mouth. "Didn't think. Men like you don't bid without thinking." He took a long pause, then said, "Saw your eyes. They looked like you'd rather burn than beg." She didn't blink. "Maybe I would have. But you didn't." That was all. No poetry, no salvation speech, just a man stating a fact and leaving space for her to exist beside it. She rose and went to the well, drew water, washed her arms, didn't look back. That night, something strange happened. She sang, not loud, barely above breath. A tune from the hills, something her aunt used to hum while hanging linens. She didn't know the words, only the lilt. A sorrow song half forgotten and haunting. Bo didn't say anything, but he paused in sharpening his knife. When she stopped, she whispered, "I don't know why I did that." "Because you remembered." Is remembering safe? No, but it's real. They didn't talk after that. The silence felt full, not hollow. In town, the rumors grew legs. Lady Granger told the butcher that Dora was a witch, probably cursed. Said Bo had sunk too deep in grief to see the devil in her eyes. The preacher hinted at needing prayer for lost lambs misled by wild temptresses, but no one rode out to stop them. Not yet. On the 6th night, Dora found the guest room empty again. Still untouched, still too soft for her bones. But she stood in the doorway longer this time, one hand brushing the quilt like it might bite her. She didn't enter. She returned to her place near the hearth, boots on, knife under the fold of her skirt. But her head leaned against the wall this time, not the door. She had no reason to trust him. No promises had been made, no touches exchanged, no vows whispered under stars. Just presence, consistency, space. But sometimes space was safer than shelter. Sometimes space was shelter. On the 7th day, the town came knocking indirectly. Marshal Grimes rode out under the guise of checking cattle branding. He came up slow, boots polished, his badge dull from polish instead of use. Bo didn't greet him. Marshal leaned against the fence. "Heard you got yourself a woman." Bo said nothing. "You know how that looks?" Bo nodded. "Like someone's alive in my house again," Marshal chuckled. "She got papers. She's not a slave. You know Ezekiel wants her back." Bo's jaw tightened. He lost that right when he struck her. "You didn't see what she did before." "I saw enough. You're risking your ranch for a girl you don't know. I buried my family once. I ain't afraid of ashes." The marshal paused. "If it comes to trial," Bo cut him off. "It won't." The marshal left. Dora watched all of it from behind the barn slats, the same place Bo had once watched her. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. Something else. Something like disbelief. She walked back into the house and picked up a sewing needle for the first time in a year, began stitching the ripped collar of the old dress Bo had given her. It wasn't his late wife's, she'd asked. He'd said, "No, just found it in the chest. Thought it had suit the wind in your walk." She didn't know what that meant, but she sewed anyway. By evening, she wore it, not for him, for the mirror, for herself. The neckline sat right. The sleeves floated when she moved. He saw her pass by the window, lit by dusk. Didn't speak, but he paused again. Not because she looked like a bride, because she looked like someone unbroken. That night, she opened the guest room door, laid on. Top of the quilt, boots still on, but the knife stayed on the nightstand. She didn't sleep, but she rested. In the early morning, just before dawn, she heard footsteps on the porch, slow, intentional, a weight to them that didn't belong to Bo. She reached for the knife, crept to the front window. A rider, tall, broad, hat low, horse steaming in the cold. She knew that silhouette. Ezekiel. He hadn't forgotten, and he hadn't come to talk. Dora's breath fogged the glass as the figure turned slightly, revealing the shape of a riding crop in his gloved hand. The sky behind him was the color of coal, and the storm hadn't even started.